All right, let me just let two more in. Okay, well, welcome everyone to our second session in our One West Quarterly Academy with Sports ETA. We are so excited today to have Jackie with us from Game Day Communications, and we're just happy to have everyone here. So, Jackie, without further ado, I will let you take it away, and I'll continue to admit people as they come in.
Yeah, and we have John David here, our CEO from Sports ETA. So, John, do you want to say hello and good morning, good afternoon?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate this opportunity to partner with the team at One West and to provide some great sports tourism content. If you're not familiar with Sports ETA, we're the trade association for the Sports Events and Tourism Association. It's been around for 34 years. We love to say that we're really narrow in focus, but we're really deep in resources. And Jackie is truly one of our secret weapons on our team. Been along part of our team for a long time and just brings a great perspective. And we're really excited about the session. When we were ideating this with Melissa and the team, we just thought this would be a great one. And we firmly believe that sports tourism is one of those best advocacy tools that any destination can utilize for so many reasons, but really because it just translates so well. And Jackie's got enormous expertise in this area, and I can't wait for you guys to enjoy this session with her. So without further ado, Miss Jackie Rowe.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Go. There we go. Everyone see that? Okay, Molly, can you see that?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, terrific. So today, sports tourism, your destination's best advocacy tool. And what I want to talk to today really is to walk you through the brand new State of the Industry report that we just unveiled at Symposium a couple months ago, and really give you some nuggets of information. And then I'd love for you to leave with kind of a mini communications plan where you can really take this back into your community, your industry, your elected officials, whoever needs to hear this story. So I would love for you in the chat just to type in where you're calling in from, just so I can see the different markets that we have going there. And as John said, I've been serving as director of PR for Sports ETA for over 15 years now. And this is one of the most exciting industry reports that we've had, certainly in my career with Sports ETA. So, what I love about this report is it is the first time that we're looking at spectator and participatory sports together. So when we combine those two industries, we're looking at $274.5 billion. That's 1.6 million jobs. So it's really exciting to see how these two industries really support each other under the large umbrella. And that's really the beauty of all of the membership of Sports ETA and how they are working on the spectator side, the participant side, the youth side, the professional side, and really creating a portfolio of events that certainly are, maybe they stand the test of time in terms of they're an annual event, they're a beloved community event, but also taking a look at how you can use sports events to really fill those slower times, those shoulder seasons. And so that's really what we'll talk about today. So if you're old school like me and have paper, or if you're new school, start a new note on your phone and just call it Sports Tourism Impact. And really, I'll kind of give you some nuggets to write down and just really start memorizing these really for your own elevator speech, if you will. So again, you've got participatory sports. That's your volume, right? That's your 300 team soccer tournament that comes in, every first weekend in October. It's there. We know it's coming every first year of October. The coaches love coming there. The scouts love coming there. The hotels are terrific, so we know. Spectator sports, what you're going to see there is these are more of your perhaps professional, your college town. They probably have live TV or some type of streaming situation, and they're going to be high visibility. People are traveling in. They're coming in a day before, they're going to tailgate, they're going to stay until Monday. They may be flying in. These potentially are your international travelers as well. So when you think about these two engines, they're really feeding the economy. So 339 million travelers, and you can see the room nights and then of course the tax revenue. These nuggets are really important as you're talking to hoteliers. Hey, our industry is at 191.8 million room nights. Tax revenue, these are your elected officials. These are your county commissioners, your city council. So these are really good numbers to really drive home that 274.5 billion. And just so we're all on the same page, just the definitions, I won't read these to you, but this is how we define spectator and participant sports tourism. And this report is done in partnership with Tourism Economics. So they really give us the guardrails here, and I'll talk a little bit more about them as well. Also, if you have any questions as I'm going through, please feel free, stop me, and love to have a discussion. So I mentioned Tourism Economics. They're a terrific partner with us at Sports ETA. And this is a really important slide. What you're seeing here is you're seeing Sports ETA on the same stage as other economic impact studies that maybe U.S. Travel will do, or they'll pull federal economic data to support it. So we're talking the same lingo as government officials are used to seeing and hearing. And then just to further define the layers of impact, you've got direct, indirect, induced. So, direct is your big number. The indirect supply chain effects, hotel, transportation, food and beverage, and I'll go into that more. And then, of course, the workforce, which is so important. So here's just a quick summary of really the two together, and then you combine them. So participant sports, like I mentioned, this is your bulk travel. These are your 300 team soccer tournaments. So you can see they're carrying the weight there in terms of the total travelers. New this year, and really this is under John David's leadership, which I love, is we're really at Sports ETA, we're really taking a look at the international side of the house and what those visitors look like. This is truly a golden decade, and many of you either attended, hosted, watched World Cup matches, I'm sure, last month and mid-June. And so what we're seeing is the start of FIFA World Cup, then we'll have the LA Games in 28. Then we'll have rugby, World Rugby in the United States, 31 and 33, men and women. And then we'll have the Winter Games in Salt Lake in 34. So it's a huge period of international opportunity for our membership and for our destinations. So this report really is the first benchmark of that number. So I can't wait to see next year's study with all the World Cup fans. The study also, it's about 70 pages. It is available to you. And what I've done is I've just pulled, it's beautifully designed by Diane, our graphic designer. And I've pulled out just nuggets for you to start thinking about screen capture, start to use on your own social media as well. You are a very important part of this economic ecosystem. So we'd love for you to share any and all resources that we have. So this talks to a lot of constituents here, depending on who you're speaking to. So I've pulled out just a couple of charts that I love. Here's another one in terms of the direct spending. Any surprises here? When I first read the draft report, I love this tournament operations at 5.5 billion. I thought that was really interesting. Retail trade, Dick's Sporting Goods should be jumping up and down reading this report. Of course, a a spectator and a participant, tourist is, hitting all of these buckets. The part of the report too that is also new, we mentioned the international visitors. So this is the first benchmark that we're looking at that. So that's 1.9 international visitors into America during the reporting time. So 4.3 billion, of course, that's only going to grow. Also, for the first time ever, we have added destination profiles, event rights holder profiles, venue profiles, and industry partner. And this is important too because Sports ETA really has worked hard to expand its membership footprint to really be the Big Tent for the entire industry. We used to be called the National Association of Sports Commissions. Now we're Sports ETA and really servicing all of these areas of the industry. And we were surveying our members, we're surveying industry partners, and they're giving us really interesting information as it relates to budget, where they're strategically looking to grow, what they're worried about, the competition side of things, just the bidding process. So it's a really interesting snapshot in the back of the report that I would encourage you to read. This is one I thought was really interesting. So I'll let you kind of take a look here, but this is really the financial incentives and funding support. Of course, we always talk about room nights and economic impact. Every report's going to start with room nights, right? But again, through John David's leadership, we're seeing more and more impact opportunities with our members and what they're taking a look at. And, you might have a spectator sport that might draw, 10,000 people, might fill an arena, but it's on ESPN and it's got global coverage. And so that's where you see that growth of exposure and brand awareness. So I love seeing that. Repeat business, I think, is also really interesting. I love the earned media side of the house. So almost half of our destinations are saying earned media is important. And a few years ago, we launched the Sports ETA Earned Media Impact Calculator. And what that does is measures anything that shows up on local TV, local newspaper, online with keywords. And then we can tell you how many media impressions and we can tell you the earned media value if you would have had to purchase that. So we just did one for two match rugby friendly in Las Vegas, and I was blown away by all the coverage on AOL.com and Yahoo Sports in New Zealand and in Australia, which was really interesting to see just how different media consumption habits are in international markets. Any questions on this slide where people are taking a look at how they're evaluating the financial incentives? I think green initiatives too will only continue to grow, especially with our next generation of consumers who really has an interest in green initiatives and eco-friendly events. This was another one that I thought you would find interesting too. So we've got event types, which, in our industry, youth has led the way for a number of years. But you're seeing the growth in international and senior, I think is interesting too, as our population ages. And then is host destinations kind of the criteria that they're looking for? You can see venue costs all the way up to destination demographics. What this slide tells me is your data collection is so important. It's more and more important than ever. I was just down at the Florida Sports Foundation talking about data-driven storytelling. And there were probably every market from Florida was there. So call it 30 markets, kind of similar size to this meeting. and the different ways that folks were gathering data was just off the charts. And so what we were helping them do is really define a system for data collection that the Florida Foundation then can start to use consistently with lawmakers when they're making grants, with rights holders. So everyone is using really the same playbook as it comes into data collection. So I think if you wrote down anything from today, it would be standardizing your data collection. And that's everything from, the 10-team softball tournament to the professional all-star game and making sure that you've got that data. Here's another example just from the report that I thought was really interesting. And this talks about just what folks are thinking about. It's the economy for sure. You're seeing, of these 10 things, I would say half are financial related. Staffing shortages, you're seeing a lot there. I know at Sports ETA we're doing a lot in terms of promoting the industry, certainly to the next generation, with a new internship program and kind of that next gen sports events and tourism professional. Then you're seeing how are folks using AI? We're seeing a lot of interesting talk about private equity in sports. And you're seeing that all the way from the youth side of the house, all the way to professional side of the
You like
house.
what you see?
Oh, all good there. Any surprises on kind of impactful trends? Anything you'd add? Molly, anything you're seeing in your market that you'd add?
Sorry, I took myself on mute. I'm kind of all over the place. So, working at One West, we work with all the markets, which is wonderful. So not
Mm-hmm.
specifically one.
Yeah. I think if I were sitting in your seats, I would really be looking at AI and the automation of, again, just creating consistency in terms of data collection, in terms of protocols, processes, those types of things. So that would be certainly an area to take a look at. I think also you're seeing rights holders use AI to really take a very close look at RFPs, and everything's apples and apples right now, right? So that's where you see that data-driven site selection. I think that will become more and more important as well. So that's kind of the basis of the report, the Sports ETA State of the Industry Report for 2026. Any questions on that report now that I've run through it?
I'll throw a general question out. I'd like to know what destination marketing organizations are using to track hotel room usage from events, from sports events.
So I will right here. This is the inputs that the economists at Tourism Economics are using. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, trying to get down to a little more granular. So when an event comes to your town, um, the tracking of those hotel room nights gets interesting with all the
Mm-hmm.
different ways of checking in and front desk and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm just curious if there's people are using more, again, AI driven or some sort of you know data source to gather the actual impacts, or where are people going with that?
Jackie,
Yeah, and I think
I might
you're,
be able to speak to that a little bit.
yeah.
Look, and this is John from Sports ETA. You have massive variation in the approaches here. I think fundamentally what we see most common, and honestly, it's kind of regardless of market size, is your tried and true traditional methods of working directly with, with the event organizer in advance, what are the hotels that have been blocked, what are those post events pickup reports, what do those look like, what we, so that kind of that basic foundation piece. Hey, we know that they've, created a block of 5,000 rooms. We've gone out, we've worked with them to do post-event reporting to find out, how the actualization of those room nights were. So that you'll see that kind of as a standard. The vast majority of the sports ETA membership, they're also using the DI impact calculator to then plug those numbers in that traditional reporting that's coming back in from the event owner to go in and gauge, what that translation is into impact and into the economics of it based on that local destination's actual tax brackets. So I think that's really what you're seeing. Also, too, one of the things that we strongly recommend is Jackie showed you some slides in terms of incentivization and how destinations are bidding on and winning events. We always tell everybody, hey, make it a requirement that event rights holder support,
Mhm.
provide you all with great post-event reporting, so that you can aggregate all of that data. So that's kind of table stakes, if you will. The next side of it, and like what we're seeing more and more, especially with the larger markets with larger budgets, is then diving into looking at resources like Placer AI, Zartico, and others, where you're doing that geolocating. You're taking the sports event facility where the event occurred, you're geolocating, geofencing that area, and then watching what those trends are, both from a cell phone, information, and both from a spend information from credit card data, to then kind of go back and bounce back and forth off of the other numbers that you've received and really try to kind of fill the gap there. We certainly recognize that sports tourism is one of the more challenging, verticals to track room nights. Quite frankly, I mean, all of us on this call, we're going to go to a conference. We're pulling out the company credit card and we're staying at the host hotel. Now we flip the script and we go on a sporting event. We're using points. We're doing it as economically as we possibly can. We may or may not stay in the host hotel or within the block because we're trying to find a cheaper rate because it's on our own personal dime. So, but really working with the rights holder is certainly, first and foremost the best practice and what most people are doing to try to really articulate and then plugging those numbers into that EIC. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think that's the path I'm going down. We're just seeing a significant change in the way the information is reported back from the hotels because of a lot of our reasons. There's a lot of different ways and components to that, but so trying to get accurate tracking is getting harder and harder to do. And then got a little bit of skepticism in some of the geolocation formats
Sure.
as well.
Yeah.
Because some of the
Right.
numbers that they come back with are just like, wow, we got a facility that holds 10,000 people and you say there were 31,000 people there. Yeah.
No.
So yeah, I'm just curious if I'd love to have a universal solution, but I'm sure that's tricky.
Yeah, it's challenging. The other thing I will say that more and more sports events rights holders, are, utilizing, some of the larger third-party housing companies, Team Travel Source, Event
Mhm.
Connect, or the Event Pipe product and things of that nature. In many cases, that is greatly simplifying and aggregating the pickup reports. So again, but it falls right back into, hey, understanding that rights holder that's coming in. Are you working with a third-party housing company? Collaborating directly with them so that you can get those reports back quickly. But look, I can attest to it. I understand the challenge of getting reports back from third parties, and it's shocking sometimes how difficult that can be. That's why we always say make sure you attach your funding, to to any funding that you could be providing or support to them providing data back, because that'll certainly guarantee that they're prompt with that.
Yeah. That was actually the resolution of the Florida meeting that I attended in June, that they all looked each other in the eye and said, "Yeah, we're going to do that." So more to come. This is really when we talk about the message by audience. This I think is probably one of the most important slides that we have here as we're talking about the industry report. And it's really, like I said, kind of leaving today with a mini communications plan where, if you do run into a city council member, the mayor, hey, what's going on? What's going on with the industry? That you're able to have these 2, 3 bullet points with you. Obviously they care about the tax revenue and the number of jobs in their city and their county. Your tourism board, they care about the room nights, of course. But I think you all have really an opportunity to be sitting at the economic development table and just talking about the growth of this industry, the sports events tourism industry. And we've seen amazing growth over the last few years, and we're, I think, only going to see more growth with the events we have coming into America, and then just the growth of youth and new sports coming in. Flag football is having a moment thanks to the NFL and what they're doing. So there's a lot of interesting new opportunities within the space too to keep an eye on. Anyone have any recent interactions with any of their stakeholders where they've used the research and it's worked, or you'd like to see something else that you'd like to share? And John, jump in because I know you're meeting with and talking to members every day about how they're using this great research too.
Yeah, Jack. Yeah, I'll say I think what's been great to see is the size and the scope of the research, and again, it just gives you that opportunity to showcase to your stakeholders the enormity of the economy that is, sports events and tourism. I mean, one of the funny little anecdotes that I plug in, and you may have seen this on the last presentation, is the fact that, if sports tourism was the GDP of an economy, that it would be like the 54th largest economy, in the United States. And I think that's what's, so exceptional about the opportunity to share, trying to share this type of anecdotal stories, as you're working to create stakeholder buy-in within your community and create that advocacy. And I think Jackie's really going to get into, the matching of the message to the audience and why that becomes so important. But we've just seen a lot of our destinations jump in and really try to take these numbers and just share them as an overall and then dive into their local side of things with great success.
Thank you, John. Yeah, this is really where the advocacy comes to life, and we would love for you to use this cadence as you can with your social media, your database, your email, certainly presentations, events. But for us, we see huge growth, especially after we come out of symposium with just LinkedIn and how members are using growth. And, John challenges us all the time to live like the sports ETA members, see what they're doing. And I think LinkedIn is certainly the place for that, where members and rights holders and industry partners are really sharing information and finding information, quite frankly. Your newsletters, of course, making sure that they're updated with elected officials and new stakeholders and everyone who should be getting that as well. We always advocate a quarterly presentation to anyone who will have you, for sure, especially either before or after a significant event that you're hosting. And again, an event is such an opportunity to bring electeds, media to the event on a Saturday morning with the 300 soccer teams in town. Every hotel's packed, the breakfast cafes are packed. So I think that's a huge opportunity for you as well.
And Jack, if I could jump in on
Yeah.
that one, I'll tell you guys a funny anecdotal story. For 25 years prior to joining Sports ETA, I was with USA BMX, the governing body for that sport. And we would, again, to Jackie's point, on the weekend, we'd have an event. We'd have an event in Salt Lake City, for example, and we'd have 1,000 athletes there, about 2,500 to 3,000 spectators there, and we would kick off our Saturday with our traditional opening ceremony, which had a parade lap and everything. And I would always work hand in hand with the DMO to bring in local dignitaries. And it was actually pretty comical, right? Because look, the attendees of the event could absolutely care less about the mayor being there or the head of, whatever, the Chamber of Commerce or maybe any of the elected officials. But we certainly created that opportunity for the mayor or the head of the chamber or an elected official to speak and welcome the crowd. So we would do the parade lap, have a beautiful national anthem, and then again, the general customers were just dying because they're like, get these people off the microphone. But we did it very intentionally, just to Jackie's point, to where the electeds had to park. And I would typically not give them parking passes just so they had to park out and walk through and see all the license plates and walk in and find and see all the masses of people. So I share that story because it's kind of funny and anecdotal, but taking and maximizing every little moment like that, especially in sports where you've got all these kids and families gathered, it just leaves a lasting impression. And there was never a time where a mayor or another elected didn't walk up to us and we're just like, we had no idea. And you're dying because you've been working so hard and you know the size and scope of it, but until they see it, they don't. And so those little opportunities are a massive win.
Yeah, for sure. And another example I wanted to share is we work in programming and marketing a space that sits right between where the Reds play, their ballpark, and where the Bengals play their stadium. And there's about 16 entertainment bars, restaurants. There's a museum, a concert hall, and opening day in Cincinnati is a national holiday. And so, the home of professional baseball. So a parade, 42,000 people at the game, a block party that draws 100,000 people. It's just everyone's wearing red, happy. And this year we had a small incident with youth violence that basically shut the area down after the ball game. And that I tracked the negative PR over 3 days from when the incident happened, and then the next 3 days, it was $7 million in negative media to that space. So, that's a lot to overcome when the entire annual budget for the space is 500,000. So what we did is we used basically the World Cup to bring everyone down. It was your home for soccer viewing. And so from June 11th through July 19th, we could track foot traffic through the APIs, the Wi-Fi APIs in the area. And we could track, it was like foot traffic was up 19% year over year. And that equated to 354,000 people visiting that area during World Cup. And I'm not saying they were all watching matches and all that, but we use that as the hook. And when we sent that out to media, it really started reframing. Oh God, 350,000 people went down to the banks. Must be safe. And I started hearing more positive, and I started seeing more positive messaging on our social media platform, listening platform as well. So it's interesting how you can use the data to certainly reach the broad public, the mass media that you can use, but also it helped with police. We were able to report that stat. So police started using that as their talking point. The city manager started using that as her talking point. So think about how data, certainly from this report or other data that you collect, can start to tell that narrative. We also, we want you to use this report the minute it comes out, but then start to break it down each quarter, annually, certainly, to the proper stakeholders that might make sense. This data is benchmarked. It is reported internationally now through our work with international rights holders. And then, feel free to use it in bid presentations, anything sponsorship or media. John David will be your go-to expert for any media interviews in your market that you may have. Any thought leadership we're happy to help with as well. And then, I think, and John, jump in here too. I think what we're seeing with, especially, and I'll give an example, Hamilton County, Ohio has a large event grant fund that is anywhere from 750,000 to $1 million. And they are asking for more and more data every year. It seems like they're getting more sophisticated in the data that they use, which I love. And one new metric that came out last year was tell us the media coverage the event got the year before outside of Hamilton County. So that'd be outside of the Cincinnati media market, and then inside. So they wanted us to quantify the media coverage, which we were able to do using the sports ETA, the media tracker. So I think back to the question of data, it's just getting more and more important in terms of how to use the data to unlock those dollars. I think is really what you're seeing the top 10 states who are on the top 10 participant and spectator states. They're really putting together a really thoughtful portfolio of events that are, creating volume when they need to, or impact, through TV coverage or awareness or streaming for the destination. So I think these are some really interesting trends that we're seeing with members, how they're using the data, how they're using their own data for predictive analytics. And, this is anything from what are new business opportunities to fill my calendar gap in September. What's the most ideal weather condition for my festival the first weekend on October. I can run a 5-year weather analysis from the National Weather Service. So I think, using the predictive analytics around this report are really interesting. And then we always like to just kind of open it up for kind of Q&A and discussion. But before I do that, I have some commercial announcements. If you are not a member and would like to learn more, these are our colleagues who are there for you. So Jordan, Michelle, and Ray Lynn, and feel free to scan that to learn more. They're a tremendous asset to the team and to our members. And then we have a couple events coming up too that I think you'll find interesting. The Forest Summit, which really is a terrific 3-day experience, and it's talking about everything from revenue to housing to events. I mean, it's really talking about everything that the industry brings together. Always very well attended, and Fort Worth's a great host city. And then we've got the Chief Executive Summit in beautiful San Diego, January of next year. And this is what it is. It's the CEOs of the industry come together. And again, this is, I would say, high level strategy. What did you learn? What are you worried about? What's keeping you up at night? So just some really interesting conversations take place there. So let me stop sharing. There we go. Good. So questions for John David and myself just on what's happening in sports events and tourism, the industry, and how we can be a resource. We're happy to field those. And I will share these slides. Molly, should I just share the slides with you?
That would be fantastic. And I'll
Okay.
set them out to the invites.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Of course, happy to.
Yeah, and Jackie, one of the things I would certainly share, with the audience in terms of the advocacy is, one of the things we found, and I think, somebody mentioned earlier about skepticism, it's a common denominator right now. A lot of times people are skeptics of the numbers that are presented. They're skeptics. We mentioned the geolocating challenges sometimes and things of that nature. One, anytime in your destination when you're hosting an event, to our point earlier, where you can maximize it is absolutely key. Because that visual representation with your local stakeholders and having them engaged in a live event is just transformative. And I've seen it happen destination after destination. And two, the other thing that I would say, and why we're so passionate about sports tourism as an advocacy tool, is when you can especially tie it in to the great transformation that's happening in a community in terms of, hey, what venues are being improved upon, what facilities are hosting great events, what facilities may have been developed because of sports tourism. That's a direct translator. And I think one of the things that we certainly see with DMOs across the United States is we work so hard, we aggregate these numbers. We've got it for all of our events, and then we go share with our stakeholders the millions of dollars that our efforts as a DMO brought in. Well, the problem is especially with residents. With residents, you're just showing this big number that you're giving to the electeds who they don't trust to begin with. So oftentimes it's not helping that resident sentiment. What we really do find though is destinations that lean into the sports tourism side of it is their leading driver for advocacy, that it just hits different. It translates different because they see the benefit of it, especially when you can illustrate those improvements to facilities, new facilities that are now being constructed, and things like that. that is real. And so destinations that have a great commitment to sports tourism, and it's a core part of their own economic development, but a part of their DMO, they're just winning, and they really are transferring, that resident sentiment elsewhere. Yesterday, I was doing a prep call for a session that we're doing at US Travel's Esto session, and it was really exciting to talk to a couple of destinations. As a matter of fact, one of the destinations was Cleveland, and they were really working hard on their resident sentiment approach. And one of the takeaways from a massive study that they had done was that their greatest opportunity to change the perception of their own residents about their town, just not just about, hey, the impacts of the DMO, but how can we change our perception of whether we love our town or not. And the consultants came back and said, your number one opportunity is through sport. That is your number
Mhm.
one opportunity. And so they're developing an entire campaign for their own residents just to be fans of their own town, but through sports efforts. So it's all of these things wrapped up. But it all starts with having a fundamental approach and a systematic approach to sports tourism and investing in that vertical because it's a powerful one.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions on just the overall research and the impact that you might use in your own community?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm a DMO here out in Bend, so working with Visit Bend
Mhm.
here as our destination stewardship director. So just curious, I mean, we've kind of taken a pause, I think, the last couple of years on our sports and what we would define that and what that looks like for a Bend destination to focus on that resident sentiment and figuring out what that means and what that looks like. And I think we're at a point now at our maturity of a destination. Again, obviously a small market, we're trying to diversify that. I mean, folks come here for the outdoors. So I guess from a tourism and sports perspective, and I mean Oregon in general, I mean we might lose the Blazers. I hope that doesn't happen. But again, like where would you recommend? Like we're not a huge sports like macro wise, right? In terms of Oregon, especially in Bend, east of the Cascades of the mountain off of the Portland area. But where would you recommend or suggest like starting from the like let's say 120,000, mountain town. As part of that, is it leaning back into like those crits, those cyclings, those, GoPro, Red Bull, outdoor, sports pieces? I saw the community piece, which I think is an interesting tool to help leverage the increased resident sentiment, focusing on that, the youth kind of like more tournaments, things like that. So I guess just where would you recommend and suggest kind of like those pieces to move if you decided to kind of strategically to invest more into sports tourism overall and what that would look like for, again, a small mountain town?
Yeah, Xavier, I think I can speak to this one really, really well because I know your community well from my past history and so forth. And Bend is hysterical for me. And I used to give Kevin a bunch of crap about it because you guys are a sleeping giant. And Kevin is like, well, we did the road stuff and we pissed everybody off because we were closing roads down for the events and we're kind of taking a break. And I'm like, okay, but there are 1,000 other type of events that you guys can go and look at, and you have to be innovative. The first time I went to Bend, we were looking for an arena and we found the Deschutes County Fairgrounds. And so all of a sudden, BMX starts bringing in an event, that happens, in early springtime, brings in, 1,500 athletes, probably 5,000 total people that stay in and around Redmond and Bend. I would lean so far into those type of events. And there's fishing tournaments. There's tournaments that can happen, at a lake. One of the case studies that I'd love to use is a place called Ypsilanti Township and they had a lake and they're like, you know what? We think we could do rowing events. And so for a $500,000 investment that was made all not on the back of the DMO, but from a hotelier, a university, and a few other places, they created inflatable rowing lanes in a lake, and they're bidding on NCAA tournaments and have this just amazing asset that was totally underutilized. But I would tell you, the first step is leaning in. The first step is saying, hey, let's go find events like maybe like a road cycling event that could have had a bit of a negativity. Let's find things that hit our market size. Let's find things that work. You're a destination people love. I mean, when I was with BMX and we brought people to Bend, they couldn't stop coming back. I mean, so again, look for those events that might not be 5,000 athletes, that are 1,000 athletes, that are 500 athletes. In your chance to go out and hit singles and doubles all day long, I mean, I'm telling you that in Bend, with the right effort, if you can't produce 50,000 to 70,000 hotel room nights, if you started today, you'll have those on the books, if not 100,000 room nights. In 3 years, you could build up that portfolio. It is so easy with your assets that you have and just getting innovative, finding the right rights holders for your mix. And I mean, again, and if I'm you, first thing I would do is have you or somebody else come out to our 4S summit and get around other rights holders, similar destinations, find out what's working, and then in April, get to symposium, and you'll be around 275 rights holders that are eager and would love to come to a town like Bend.
Yeah, no, John, I appreciate that. And I think you hit it. I mean, you obviously know very well. I mean, yeah, working with Kevin, he's still in contact with Kevin often, and they did that very well during his tenure, right? So again, it's kind of like the piece of like that resident sentiment piece. But now I think getting to a point where that's been increasing year over year and feeling at a good spot to like now onboarding, a more specific group sales strategy and figuring out what is that. I mean, we know folks come here for the recreation, the outdoors, but again, now how do we continue to diversify that and
Yep.
sports being one of those at the top of the list of like wanting to continue to lean into because I mean we do have a desirable destination, but then again, yeah, like how do we reintroduce that and what are those key pieces that we want to do as part of that?
Yeah.
So,
So much opportunity, man. So
yeah.
we've been waiting for you to come back, brother.
Well, we're here, so we'll
All
chat.
right.
That's why we're here.
A couple other resources I'd love to share. We have an endurance sport white paper that is on the website, so check that out. It's a really great resource. And then, as you were both speaking, I was thinking about just the wellness initiatives, John, that are going
Yeah.
on. If you want to speak a little bit about that, I think Ben could own that big time.
Yeah, we've got some really great health and wellness initiatives where it's kind of sports tourism, twisted into that health and wellness opportunity. And we've got some great online resources, both within some free white papers available to the public and some deep dive long form education programming, and where we've seen great success. I mean, health and wellness is a massive marketplace, and there's health and wellness that stands alone as a tourism driver, and then there's certainly health and wellness that you, as a community, as a DMO, you dive into and you factor it into all of your events to where there's an opportunity. And again, not every town can do that. A town like Bend could all day long, to where you've
Yeah,
got so much else to offer those attendees while they come and visit.
yeah, it's funny y'all are saying that, because that's something that we've definitely put into our group sales strategy as part of that for wellness and a lot of the information and data that's out there and articles that are promoting and seeing like a huge trend in that. To your point, John, of just like, yeah, they're complement each other really well and also can work separately. And I think it's just I've never thought about the sports piece being a driver for community sentiment as well, right? So I think between that and the wellness piece it's just interesting. So yeah, Jackie and John and other folks on that like
Yeah, and you might
also.
also do some research, within the market and how are people, what are they consuming? What sports, what interests do they have? And then you start going after rights holders who share that. And then that's a win-win, right? Because you're listening to the residents, you're hearing them, you're going after what they want to see in their city, but then you're bringing a really motivated, passionate fan base to the rights holder. So, it's a great engagement tool for sure. Yeah, I love that. And I would really take a look at the portfolio strategy. And when you look at health and wellness, look at Miami and New Orleans have recently started two wellness festivals, again, with that strategy in mind for resident sentiment. Yeah, great question. Got time
Thank
for
you.
a few other questions. Any parting words you want to leave, John?
No, I'd like to thank Molly and of course Melissa for the opportunity to share this information with you all. And again, this is just a glimpse into a small portion of what we offer and we provide, and we just love to share this information with anybody that'll listen. I mean, hopefully you
Mhm.
guys can feel the passion that we have for sports tourism. 65% of our members report that in the group sales side that sports tourism is the number one room night generator. And I think when you really take that and you talk about how it can be such a great driver for positive resident sentiment, for positive economic development, for facility development, where you're building these great assets for your local community, it's a win. It's a win all day long. I know at times it's intimidating to say, hey, where can we start? Where do we go? but no matter where your destination is, with a little bit of innovation, there's something there for you. I know recently we were talking to a destination, they're a beach destination, and they just couldn't, they could only think about, the beach and that asset. And we were like, no, there's so much more. You want to do pickleball? Find a parking lot. We'll help, you
Yep.
can do pickleball in a parking lot. You want to do a cheer event? Find an airport hangar. I mean, there's so many sporting events that even without with even out dedicated facilities, even without dedicated facilities, you can still find a way to win in sports tourism. You just got to be innovative. And we've got a lot of our team members that come right from your space that can share some of those exciting ideas and opportunities. So know that Jackie and I are always here for you to help in any way that we can. And please never hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, and I would just, the part of this industry that I love is the collaboration, and folks are willing to always raise their hand to help and share information. So as you're thinking about strategy, portfolio development, sports events and tourism, please reach out. Let us know. I mentioned John is available as a media expert, to come into city council, the local newspaper, whatever that may be. But please know that we are a resource here for you.
Thank you both so, so much. What a wonderful presentation. And I'm sure many people got lots of wonderful takeaways. So we appreciate you, Jackie, for hosting this session. And John, thank you so much for being here. And we've got our last and final session with Sports ETA on September 10th. So we hope a lot of you will join that as well. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Everybody.
Molly. Thanks,
All right,
team.
have a
Take
wonderful
care.
day. Bye-bye,
All right.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.